Same ratio then, right? We have a $100 product for 29 and you have a
Yeah.
$500 product
Yeah.
for 80.
So
So
it
we,
starts to even out in that space.
yeah,
I just think
yeah,
we got to let the customer know and not be
yeah.
afraid to charge a higher price for a quality item. When you go buy a car, you spend you buy a Mercedes, you're going to pay Mercedes dollars.
Well, I think that
you're not going to pay Kia dollars because that particular brand is going to give you the quality you're paying for. So why isn't it the same on apps?
Hello and welcome back to the channel, everybody. I am your host, Vortex, from MobileMusicPro.com, your home for mobile music production. And this month we're back at it again with some more iOS music discussion with some very prominent members from the music app space. And don't forget, we want to hear from all of you on these topics as well, so definitely make sure to leave your thoughts on the discussion in the comments below. But first, real quick, I just wanted to thank all of our panelists so much for being on the show, especially Derek from IK Multimedia, who only had a brief amount of time to talk to us. So we just can't thank him and all the panelists enough for taking time out of their busy lives to have a discussion with us on the show. I had such an amazing time, and everybody contributed such interesting commentary that I'm sure you'll learn something. So without further ado, let's get right into the 9th episode of this podcast, and I very much hope you enjoy. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Mobile Music Roundtable podcast right here on the Mobile Music Pro channel. Thank you guys so much for joining. We have another amazing podcast for you. We try to bring these to you every single month, but this one lapsed a little bit, but we're gonna get to it, and we're gonna have a great time because we have some fantastic topics and some fantastic panelists. So without further ado, let's go around and introduce the panelists on this new roundtable. So first up, we have Mr. Caspar Bock, Managing Director at Baby Audio, which of course has those free amazing apps like Magic Switch and Magic Dice, and they just released their brand new app, Crystalline, and here's hoping for some more apps, Super VHS maybe, and maybe even the Comeback Kid. But hey, Caspar, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for the invite.
Yes, sir. Appreciate you being here. Really excited to have you guys be one of the newest people to start porting your apps to iOS. So we're going to get into some questions that I'm super curious about.
Sounds good.
Yes, sir. All right. Then next up, we got Mr. Derek Floyd, the Senior Account Manager over there at IK Multimedia. You guys all know IK Multimedia, apps with Sample Tank, Mixbox, Sampletron. Mixbox, of course, is pretty much on every single one of my tracks. So, man, how you doing today, Derek?
Hey, there. I really appreciate it.
Yes, sir. I know you got a lot to say, man, and you've been working at IK for a minute, so I just super appreciate you being here. Right? I know you got some info, maybe we'll get some inside track on that.
You never know. You never know.
All right. Then finally, last but not least, the one and only great Jatin Chowdhury from Chowdhury, of course, from Chow Tape, Chow Kick, Chow Matrix. This guy does an entire freaking paper on something and then uses the app as the end result to prove that it works. So, man, really blowing us all away, Jatin. How you doing today, bro?
Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me on. I'm doing really well.
Yes, sir. I'm super excited. If you guys don't know, make sure you do follow all of these people because we'll have their links, of course, in the description below. So follow these guys. Super smart and super in the mobile music community. All right. So let's go ahead and get to our very first topic today. This is kind of a topic that's been talked about maybe at length at this point, but really there's a bit of a new angle and spin on it now because now we're going into the software realm. So what we're going to talk about first is, of course, how to cope with GA.S, which is Gear Acquisition Syndrome. Before, all of these soft synths, people started requiring a lot of hardware synths, and it got kind of maybe crazy for some people, spending thousands of dollars and stuff like that. But now we have iOS music apps, and there's definitely a few people like myself that are quite addicted to downloading the new music apps. And so, maybe we can give some advice to some people on that. So first, we'll start with you, Derek. What are your comments on this, man? There's just too many apps to cope with. Like, what would you? What is your recommendations?
Well, IK Multimedia has been making apps for years, and we really wanted to. We started creating our apps to be able to work with our hardware devices. If you've ever heard of iRig, of course, we're the main ones who started that. We're the ones who created that whole ecosystem. So we wanted you to be able to plug into our hardware and then have that experience with the software itself or the application. GA.S or Gear Acquisition Syndrome is a tough one because everybody wants to have the latest gear all the time. And musicians constantly want to go on and go, let me have the one that just came out. But half the time we need to stick with the ones we already have, right? We need to learn how to use what we have. So the first thing I would say with that is just saying, learn to be creative with the products that you have first off the gate. How are you using them? Are you using them effectively? Did you even read the manual how to use the product? A lot of times we get these great iOS apps and there's a lot of functionality in them, but people don't take the time to really figure out what it can do. They just throw it on their phone and throw it on their iPad, and then they make a few changes and then they're done. So first of all, just definitely learn the ones you have. But then, I know our products, we try to give you a free version to start you off with so you can kind of get into the app itself, whether it be a guitar app or a keyboard app or any of the apps that we have there, or like the mixing apps, of course. We try to get you at least into the ecosystem to try to figure out if this is the one you want. So you can always try to find the free versions of things first and or work on the stuff that you have from the get. That's what I would say with Conquer G.A.S.
Fantastic comments, because there really are a ton of free apps on there. In fact, we even have a blog post on the site right now, an ultimate list of free iOS music apps. And there's a bunch of them on there. So that is definitely a good place to start if you kind of feel starting getting maybe overwhelmed with purchasing all these apps. But really great advice to start learning this stuff, because man, stuff gets really, really in depth. We'll go with Jatin next. And on one of his tape apps, there's so many, there's 4 pages of controls. So it's like, how can you think that you need all these other tape machine apps or all these other physical tape machines when you haven't even learned, one of these apps? So I totally agree with you on that. So on that note, Jatin, let's go with you next, man. Like, what would you say to people who maybe experience downloading too many apps or maybe get a little bit too addicted to apps? Of course, I have to have download a ton for the channel, but I would probably, even without the channel, I guarantee you I would be in the same place as a lot of these folks here that may be downloading a few too many apps. So what is your advice for those folks?
I think, at least for me, I've never had like too bad G.A.S with like software things in general, but especially with like hardware. And for me, it's guitar pedals lately. I always want the new guitar pedal. And one thing that's been helpful is just kind of the fact that I have a limited amount of physical space where I can keep my guitar pedals. And so I think with software, I try to think about it the same way, where it's like, okay, sure, my computer has space for, hundreds of plugins or similar with, my iPad. But if I sort of constrain myself to, okay, I'm only going to let myself use space for this many plugins. And then once it's filled, if I want a new plugin, I have to sort of get rid of an old one. I don't really have to get rid of them because it's, where, but thinking about it that way has really helped me. I don't know if it would work for everyone, but yeah, that's sort of thinking about it like hardware from a constraints perspective. I think it's kind of nice. And then, yeah, as Derek was saying, just getting familiar with what you already have. A lot of times, if you're thinking of getting something new, maybe you already have something that can fulfill that role. And just getting really good with the stuff that you have is great, because then, it's like a sculptor with their tools. They have to know their tools really well. And I think the better you know your tools, the better music you'll make, regardless of what the tools are.
Absolutely, totally agree. And I wish that physical thing would apply to software, because let me tell you, I've got folders and folders and folders. That doesn't work for me. Like, I can fill up a ton of folders. So having all these things to scroll through, like as maybe a negative, is not really a negative for me, because I can just go through these. So, but physical space, so it's a great point for the physical space, because I definitely agree, because I don't have a whole, I don't know if you guys can see, but I don't have a whole lot of space there in my studio. So I have space for just a few different controllers, a few different MIDI controllers, and maybe one hardware synth and a Chord Chaos pad. So that actually has always kind of helped limit me too, because I've always, even before the iPad, I wanted to keep everything very minimal. I've always been a bit of a minimal and organized person. So making sure I have enough desk space to, feel comfortable, as well as actually use what's on the desk. That's always been a big way for me to be able to not get too crazy into the gear acquisition syndrome. But when it comes to the apps, I try to stay organized as well, but man, I can just easily create a new folder, throw in some new apps, and I'm like, ugh. So that doesn't work right. But great advice, Jatin. Let's finally now go on to Mr. Caspar himself from Baby Audio. What are your thoughts on this, man? You guys must have tons of hardware over there, of course, as a plugin designer with all of these plugins that you guys have. What is your advice on something like this?
Yeah, we have a lot of hardware. Well, I think my point of view is probably pretty contrarian here. I think actually the app world lends itself very well to G.A.S. It's easy and cheap, and you can get all these apps for no money. That's one of the things, and I think we'll address that later in this conversation too. Like, the whole pricing structure for apps, it's very different than with plugins, and even more different than hardware. But what it means is you can get all these great little pieces of software that are either cheap or either free or very, very cheap. And I think maybe the App Store and the whole ecosystem for iOS music, that's where it's okay to have G.A.S, and where it's actually okay to just download all this stuff and try it out and experiment. And maybe then when you find some things you like, then you'll end up using them more. But I think I'm still getting into mobile music making, but I think one of the fun parts about it is there's so much cool stuff to try out there that's different and that's just like radically approaching things from a completely different angle than how traditional instruments or traditional effects work. And I actually find the G.A.S part to be driving my interest in mobile music making. So I guess that's a little different than what everything else has been said.
No, that's a fantastic point. I mean, we'll get into the pricing in a second, but absolutely unprecedented access, you know, to the software and to these hardware emulations. It's absolutely mind blowing, which is a big reason, of course, why I started the channel, because I really wanted to get this information out there that you can have Moog synths right and 1,000 guitar pedals right on your iPad, like right there, and you can actually, you know, touch it and adjust it and modify it. And so that is a great point. People need to understand that you don't want to go too crazy, but you know what? If you do, there is enough room for you to be able to buy a bunch of apps for educational purposes, because you can really start learning about synthesis, samples, sample making, you know, and all these different types of workflows if you were to just download a few extra of these apps. But that is a great point, and I'm super glad that, you know, that opportunity is available out there. That is, of course, one of the big upsides to iOS music production is simply the cheap pricing of the iOS apps. Now, of course, that might not be able to last forever, and I think we're going to get into that right now. That'll transition into the next topic. This time we'll start with you. So I'm going to start with you, Caspar, as we go back around the table. When it comes to iOS app pricing models, historically, you know, pricing has been kind of a fraction of the desktop, as we've been saying. But, you know, maybe you guys can talk about what you've been doing over there at Baby Audio, and maybe some of the price models that you've looked into that can sort of possibly create the best economic sustainability for the developer and for the user, to make sure that the user doesn't get screwed too bad, and to make sure that the company can still stay in business.
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about it, and I'll just talk transparently. Even though, you know, as a developer, these things are hard to share, but it's really a bit of a mind when we price these things, because with software there's zero marginal costs. Like, we make one that costs a lot of money, there's a lot of resources that goes into making one product, but then selling 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, we've never sold that many of any of our units, but just to say, like, it's not an extra cost to sell them, you know, like it's the first one that costs money. And then from that point, you can price it at $1, you can price it at $100, you can price something at $500, but actually it's an arbitrary thing, because it doesn't cost you anything to make any extra additional units after you produce the first one. And then what happens is you have these two different markets where people on the App Store want to pay up to, let's say, $20 for an app, and people in the, you know, plugin desktop world might say, yeah, $99 is a good price point for a quality app. And then you have these companies like FabFilter, for instance, and this is what we studied when we got into the iOS world, that have plugins that cost $199 for desktop and $29 for the iOS. And everyone knows that it's the same product. It's the exact same code that's just been ported to two different platforms. And it's really very arbitrary how they can say, and you know, I'm not blaming them for anything, because we're doing the exact same thing with Crystalline. I'll get to that in a second, but it's very arbitrary to say that, well, you know, for one user on this system, we think this is worth $199, or the cost should be $199. But for this user who's using this other device, the exact same program should be costing only $29. And that was something we struggled with. And for a long time, we even thought about not making our plugins available for iOS, but instead making something else for iOS, like taking the ideas behind our plugins and then making purpose like driven tools for the App Store that were like simpler or smaller. So we could say, well, maybe this costs $5 or $10, but it's also different than our desktop apps. Because this whole idea of just taking a desktop plugin that's $99 and selling it for $29, it feels off. In the end, we went with the model because that's what everyone else is doing. But that's why I started this monologue by saying, I'm just going to be transparent. I still think it's kind of weird a little bit, you know, that we're taking the same plugin, Crystalline in our case, that's $99. And we're selling it for $29 on the App Store, but actually it's the same plugin. In some ways, you could say people on the App Store get a really good deal because it's cheaper, but then we have people on the App Store saying it's really expensive because $29 for an app is a shit ton of money. I'm still wrapping my head around it, and I don't think I've shared with you any solution. I've just shared some of my concerns with it, but I don't know, that it's weird to me, and I don't know if the desktop market and the mobile market will ever kind of consolidate or find a common price point, or if we're just going to live with this kind of arbitrary structure. And I mean, if users want it like that, then I guess it's fine. We're not driving the market. We're looking at what other people are doing, and we're just doing our best to try and match that somehow, you know?
Absolutely, totally agree. It is definitely strange, the world right now. And Jordan Rudess, of course, we had on here, said the same thing, where he was selling his app for like $50 on the desktop, but had to sell it for like $1 or $2 on the App Store. This was earlier days. So, but still, it's just a very, very, very strange spot to be in. Personally, how I see it is playing out, and maybe you can comment on this as well. But personally, how I see it playing out is that over time, as more and more software gets put on the App Store, more and more software that people are familiar with, like Logic Pro and FL Studio, as these bigger DAWs and these bigger apps start to come to the ecosystem, it will attract more and more traditional people who are looking to pay a little bit more than $5 for an app, right? That are expecting to pay. Oh, I'm buying this super expensive iPad. I'm getting all this power, so I should expect to have like professional quality software, so I'm going to expect to pay that. And I think that those expectations will come over time and evolve over time in the next 5 or 10 years or so, because it is so early days. People are like, I look at this as an experiment. Maybe I'll pay $30 now as an experiment. They're maybe not ready to pay that full 100, but when you have all these other DAWs on here and you have all these other people and these other hits made with the iPad and people are more familiar with it, I think that's the time that we'll start to see prices raise slowly but surely. Well, what are your comments on that?
Let me ask you a question then. What do users want? Do they want desktop plugins that are identical to what you get on desktop, or do they want simpler things at a lower cost ultimately?
Absolutely. So I definitely have a comment on that. So I would say for sure there's two groups of people. There's people that want completely unique apps like Jordan Rudess, just completely unique apps with unique user interfaces that you simply cannot and should not do on the desktop. So very, very unique, very, very creative stuff. And that's going to be kind of price, somewhere between $10, $20, $30. But then you have some folks like myself that want the exact same desktop experience like you guys are creating, and that is FabFilter's created on the iPad. And I don't care if I have to pay the exact same price as long as I can have it on the iPad. So there's kind of two groups of people that want that unique experience, and then they want that exact same experience, or at least similar as you can bring it to on the iPad, and taking advantage of the touch controls where you can.
I'll throw something in there for this one. I think when you're looking, especially at IK Multimedia products, we, like Caspar said, we put a lot of development and research into the products we make. And a lot of that we've done is either a model of a certain product, like an amp or a microphone or a cabinet, or we've modeled a certain piece of gear like a Hammond B3 or the Sampletron. So that takes a lot of money to do those products. So it's not like you're just getting some rinky-dink software application that's going to give you a couple of funky little sounds and you're having fun on your phone. These are quality, well done years of development products that have just been ported to a smaller space. So we're not going to give that product away for $5. Now, at the same time, though, we are able to give you a free version of some of those products to let you start and try it. And if you really enjoy that, or you find yourself being creative with that, or need to be creative in that space, then you can purchase an either additional sound packs or additional versions of it. Like Amplitude, you can get an all-in style, an all-in bundle. Like if you say, I really enjoy using Amplitude on my phone or my iPad, so I want everything I can get. So we'll give you an all-in bundle. Or I just want to use the Satriani version. Well, we'll give you the Satriani version for a small price. So it depends on, and it also depends on what you feel quality is worth. If you tell the customer this app's only worth $9.99 at Dog by Dog, if you tell the customer or say, hey, this app's only worth $10, he may treat it like it's only $10. If he buys this app for $30, he may go to it more because he spent a little bit more on it, and you're giving him the sense of value by the price that you give it. Does that make sense to you?
Absolutely. That's why I think that the market is viewing this right now, is they're viewing it more as a bit of an experiment than actually going out and buying a whole, Ableton Live computer, $2,000 computer with all the software. They're treating it more like an experiment. And so that's why the market, I think, is still kind of hesitant to spend the normal pricing. But there are companies like IK Multimedia that are releasing these products, and FabFilters are releasing these products that are pretty identical with higher prices. I think IK Multimedia is still coming in at the higher end of
we
the
are
range
we are
on some of the products, and people are buying it. Like I
pay for it.
Definitely pay
it's quality. If you love Mixbox on your Mac and PC, and you know how valuable that product is, you're darn well going to buy Mixbox on your iPad.
I was day one on that. I was day one.
You're going to damn well buy it because you know the quality of the product.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead.
Is Mixbox for iOS the same price as Mixbox for desktop?
No. It is not.
It's
Well, see,
cheaper.
that's exactly what I mean.
It's cheaper,
Because
but it's not like
then
it's $30 though.
arbitrary,
But
right?
it's not. It's
worth
not
one thing on one
$10.
platform and worth another thing on another platform.
But
We do the
but it's
same
not
thing.
$10.
Well, hold on, Caspar. Just so you know, Caspar. Yeah, like Derek was saying, just so you know, it's not $10 or anything. They do have $80 and $90 apps on the iPad. So, because remember, people are willing to pay $100 on the desktop. They will eventually pay $100 on the iPad if you can prove that it is the exact same quality product.
Same ratio then, right? We have a $100 product for 29 and you have a $500 product for 80.
So it
we
starts to even out in that space.
Yeah,
I just think we got to let the customer know and not be afraid to charge a higher price for a quality item. When you go buy a car, you spend you buy a Mercedes, you're going to pay Mercedes dollars.
Well, I think that
you're not going to pay Kia dollars because that particular brand is going to give you the quality you're paying for. So why isn't it the same on apps?
Absolutely. And I think that Derek, IK Multimedia and Baby Audio do a great job of marketing the quality of their apps, saying that this is the same quality as it is on the desktop. I think you guys do a great job on that. So now it's, in my opinion, up to the market to start to slowly realize that, holy crap, these are the same apps. I know, somebody said that everybody knows they're the same, but not everybody knows. When they see Crystalline on an iPad, they might not immediately know, and most people won't immediately understand that is the exact same one on the desktop, especially if you charge cheaper prices. They're not going to understand it right away, but the market is learning. And so I think over time, you can start raising those prices. I think prices, and RK Multimedia is definitely on board with this, where they're starting to raise their prices over time as the market starts to fundamentally understand the quality that can be brought across with the iPad and the fact that they're literally one-to-one same type of product. So I think it's just going to take some time.
Let me throw this in there too.
Please.
In the beginning of this whole revolution, when iRig first came out and when the iPhone was just released and they had the little picture of the phone on the Apple ad, one of the first apps on that iPhone was Amplitude, because we saw where mobile music was going. And we had on our tags for a long time, mobile music revolution. We knew it was coming. We knew how big it was going to be. So we started off early, making sure that our apps were going to be quality and they were going to look almost exactly identical, hopefully, to the Mac and PC version. So you didn't feel like you were getting cheated. So as the prices started to raise, you knew, okay, this is going to feel just like my Mac and PC app. Just because it's smaller doesn't mean that they have the same quality. So if we start telling, if the companies themselves begin to say, hey, these are always going to be the same as the Mac and PC version, then you get the ability to charge that $30, $40, $80, $90 tag. If it's not, and you're saying it's just an LE version or iOS version, then you can spend $10 and have a good day. That's where we leave it.
Yep.
What do you think?
I think that sounds about right to me. Caspar, I want to hear your comment, and then we got to go to Jatin, because Jatin's been quiet and patient. I want to hear.
I'm just throwing it out there.
But go ahead, Caspar. Do you have any final comments?
No, I agree with that. I think we should let Jatin talk. I actually agree with that. Yeah.
I want to hear Jatin, because man, Jatin's out here doing all the hard work, doing all the programming.
Tell us, Jatin. Tell us.
Tell us how we should price our apps, Jatin, please.
I guess I should start by saying that I know very little about business. I'm
all of Jatin's apps are 100% free, people, just so you know.
Yeah. So I've been doing it so far is that pretty much all of my apps have been like a vehicle for my research. And so because of how I feel about research and sort of my philosophical views on how research should work, I don't think it's fair for me to charge for it since it's a research project. And that's a whole other conversation, I guess.
But from a user perspective, I guess we're asking you more from a customer perspective, your thoughts.
Yeah. I don't know. I think there's sort of a few things to consider. And I guess similar to Caspar, I don't know that I really have a solution, but I think even if the app is the same between the desktop and the iOS version, that doesn't mean that the user experience is the same, because the experience is happening on iOS. That's a fundamentally different platform. And I think there's also just a lot of little things that we're sort of used to doing with desktop software that either isn't possible or just typically isn't done with iOS software. Like, for example, I know Baby Audio's plugins have demos, where you can do like a week or 2-week demo on desktop and try it out. On iOS, I don't think I've seen anyone do like a demo version. And of course, there's companies like IK and what's the other company, like Melda Productions, that do a similar thing where it's like you have a free version and then a paid version, and that seems to work.
And Red Rock Sound does that as well. Red Rock Sound does that as well. I just want to throw that out there, because they do only a 5-minute trial, and then you have to close the app again. But go ahead, sorry.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I hadn't seen that on iOS. Yeah. So I think there's like a few sort of differences in the way that these apps are used that I think makes a difference as well. But I think what's going to end up setting the prices is how expensive DAW apps are on iOS. Like, I think most of the folks I've talked to are using like AUM or Drambo or things like this, where the DAW that you're using is $20 or something, along those lines. Whereas on desktop, I mean, sure, there's folks using GarageBand and Audacity and so on, but like most folks who are buying plugins are using Ableton Live, Logic Pro, Bitwig, something like that, which is a good bit more expensive. And so I think it's maybe like the plugin prices are maybe more relative to the DAW prices than they are to the desktop version or something like that.
That's a very interesting point.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was interesting you mentioned early on, like, oh, how do you price it so that you can stay in business or be sustainable as a business? And the way I've been doing it, where everything is free, is not sustainable.
We know that. We know.
Very open about that. But yeah,
you can't feed your family on free, bro. Can't do it.
Exactly.
You gotta do something else. There you
go. But I think that's a big question where it's like, oh, okay, if you're selling your iOS version for $30 and your pro or your desktop version for $100, is that sustainable as a business model? Is it worth it to put in the time to develop for iOS if that's how much you're selling for? And I guess similar to Caspar's first point about how you're not paying any more to distribute more versions, I guess it just depends on how many folks are buying it. Like if your iOS version is half the cost, but twice as many people are buying it, then maybe it's the same. I don't know.
Yep, that makes sense. And you have to kind of gauge the market response and see what's going on. But it's a very interesting point to compare with DAWs, because CUBASIS is kind of one of the most popular DAWs on iOS, and that's $50. And that again is $50, where the desktop is $200 for the cheapest, right? So we're already a pretty lower factor there. But that is something that you can possibly gauge to price your app with, is maybe price it relative to a DAW. So to me, like for example, like the CUBASIS DAW is too cheap. It needs to be $100. But if it was being that it's $50, to me a $30 reverb app seems completely reasonable. But that's why some people get on IK Multimedia and some of these other people who are trying to raise the bar a little bit, try to raise the price a little bit, because they're like, look, I can buy a whole DAW for $50. Why do I have to spend this much money on a single plugin? And of course, the answer is all of the research and work that went into it, and of course, the pre-existing market on desktop says that this is a good price and a good product. So we just have to again kind of let the market hopefully be reasonable with some of the prices, as developers hopefully are able to raise their prices more and more over time as we get more and more people into the overall mobile music production ecosystem.
I think one way we justify it is to make our first desktop version, to actually develop the plugin. That takes a lot of resources, and enough resources that I think it's justified to sell that plugin for $99. To then take that plugin and make it iOS available, that does take less resources, because you're essentially just porting the same plugin over. That's how we justify the logic of putting it for a lower price, because we're saying, well, okay, we spend all this money making the plugin, and then we're selling it for $99, and hopefully we're making our investment back. We're not going to spend nearly as much money getting it over on the iOS platform. For that reason, we can also afford to set the price point lower, and it's more consistent with other apps on the App Store. But it still feels a little weird, like that there's this, like, if it were different, like if it really was a light version, it would be a different thing, right? But when it's essentially the same program, it's kind of weird.
Absolutely. And again, I do think that has partly to do with the market still viewing it as a bit experimental, but I think that is going to mature over the years. And man, I'm just super, super glad that companies like yours and RK Multimedia are porting your apps down there one-to-one, because the functionality is just absolutely amazing to see run in real time on an iPad. I know iPads have been powerful for a while, and even before we got the M1 chip, but sheesh, to see your guys' apps just run so beautifully and fluid and help people who are actually trying to make music on the iPad, and to be able to have that opportunity to use the one-to-one app, that is just super, super amazing. And I think that the people will see the wow factor of that. The market will eventually see the wow factor of that, because I know when I'm using FabFilter plugin and I'm dragging stuff around, I'm just like, it still blows my mind today that I'm using this on an iPad. So really, really great stuff. And I really love the commentary on your particular business model, which I think most desktop plugin models are going on, where they develop the app, to spend all the resources, develop it for desktop, and then since it doesn't take a whole lot to then bring it to iOS, they can charge a little bit cheaper on iOS. But I really am hoping that as the market matures, we can start raising those prices, because they are, especially if they are one-to-one, same quality like you see at IK Multimedia and Baby Audio. Very, very cool stuff. Jatin, did you have one more thing?
Yeah, I had
Please.
sort of an open question, I guess, going off of what Caspar had mentioned. So imagine you're a new company and you're making an audio product that's only for iOS. How would that sort of change the way that you're pricing it? And maybe
Now,
something
that's a great point to bring up, because now I want to bring up the business model of Loopy Pro, right? I don't know if you guys are familiar with the business model of Loopy Pro, but let me bring that up real quick. Where essentially how he's doing it over there is they are releasing, you buy the app once and you have the app forever. You have the app forever. But if you do want to have additional updates, annual updates in particular, next set of year of updates, you have to pay one more time. You have to pay either an upgrade, basically an upgrade version, or just, I'm not sure how he words it, but I believe it's just one more fee. And you pay that fee every single year if you want more and more updates. Now, if you're completely okay with the app and you don't need any more updates, then you can just don't worry about it. You keep the app forever on all your devices, no problem. But if you do want to use this and continue to get the new updates, because he's always updating it, then you do have to pay that new update fee. And I believe that is a somewhat sustainable model for developers, at least right now, that are trying to exclusively release their apps for iOS. That's one of the models that seems to be working, and that is relatively new with Loopy Pro.
Yeah, I think that sort of thing. I mean, I don't know as much about it, but like the way that folks outside of the audio industry seem to develop apps seems to be more based on pricing models, more like that, where maybe it's update fee or subscription or in-app purchases or things like that.
Yeah, I think on desktop they do like a version 2, right? Like SynthMaster 2, right? And so that's similar to what Loopy Pro is doing, only they're not calling it Loopy Pro 2. They're still calling it Loopy Pro. But yeah, that seems to be the traditional model that works on desktop. So it's a little bit of a twist on iOS, but I think that that might work for people who are exclusive to iOS. Whereas, with the desktop apps, they're going to already have that built for desktop. So great points on this. Great discussion, guys. Derek, I know you got to leave in a few minutes. Are you still able to stick around for one final topic here?
I can get one last question and I got to get out of there.
One last topic. Okay, then we'll start with you then on this one.
Okay.
So appreciate you being here. I know you're busy, man. Mondays are crazy days for everybody. So let's go ahead and get to the final topic today, which is going to be porting apps to iOS. So I want to know, going along this same type of pricing model type of theme, basically for IK Multimedia, what is the decision-making process on whether or not to port some of your guys' apps? Because you have a ton of apps over there at IK Multimedia. What is the decision-making process to actually decide on whether or not to actually port it down to iOS? And then what do you think is probably one of the hardest parts for IK Multimedia in that process?
I think, from a developer's point of view, I think the main reason is main way we think about it is, will it stand on its own? Will the app be just as powerful as the Mac and PC version? Because we've made our living being the ones that made them almost identical. When you get Hammond B3X on your Mac and PC, and then you download Hammond B3X on your iPad, dude, it is fire. It's about as close as you're going to get to having a real Hammond on an iPad. And that takes a little bit more time, but we say, hey, we want to make sure that experience is the same for that customer. And if we can't do it and make it smooth, then we won't do it at all. Even like with Amplitude, you download Amplitude and you see all the great pedals and cabinets and microphones that are in there. And if we couldn't make that experience exactly the same, like you do when you're Mac and PC, then we probably wouldn't do it at all. I think for us, even when you're talking about, you said DAWs and have been able to import plugins, stuff like that inside of your DAW. I think for us, as long as it's something that can be used all on its own or standalone as well. Like if you're looking at Mixbox, you can import tracks into it and still use the product all on its own. You can import, use T-Racks, mixing, mastering on that kind of. So we want to make sure that there has some kind of use that if you didn't have anything else, you still could use that product too. It's got to have some value to you in your creative process. I just think at the end of the day, for us, every product doesn't need to be an iOS product, but if we see the need that it can be creative for you, we can make the transition smooth, we can make the experience just like you have on a Mac and PC, then we'll make it work.
Makes sense to me because, man, they are smooth. Speaking of which, real quick, maybe I'll just get this in. You don't have to answer, Derek, but AUV3 sample tank, can we look forward to AUV3?
I can't answer that in a really wonderful platform, but there's a lot of stuff coming from IK this year, so be on the lookout. And again, I know I got to leave a little early, but we appreciate everyone that's out there buying our apps and buying our applications. We believe in keeping things creative, and we were part of that mobile music revolution in the beginning. And all our thing is about keeping you in a small, compact space and portable and creative. Creative with whatever you got in your hand, whether it be your Mac, your PC, your iPhone, your iPad. We want you to be creative with an IK product. So whether that means getting an iRig, and then plugging your guitar to Amplitude or getting an iRig HD or any of our other multiple plugs that you can get and plug into your device to get sound in. Because, you know, we have multiple interfaces like iRig Pro Quattro, which is an amazing device, iRig Pro IO, Pro Duo. All these devices help you get sound in. So we're the ones saying, hey, we're not even going to give you an app. We're going to get you the hardware to get the sound into that app to make sure your entire experience is complete. Not just playing on the app, but let's get the sound in, let's get your microphone, let's get the whole thing and make that portable device your portable studio. That's what IK is all about.
Absolutely. Well, let me tell you, I got my iRig keyboard and I love it. And I got my iLoud. My friend has iLoud speakers, but I need to get some at some point. Let me tell you, those are powerful. So I believe Jacob Hack has them. So very powerful stuff. So maybe we can just say goodbye to you real quick, Derek, and let us know where can we find out more about you, sir?
Well, of course, you can go to ikmultimedia.com and you will see all of our information there about IK products. And if you want to know about my podcast or podcasting, you can go to my YouTube channel, which is The Beautiful Now Project. So go to youtube.com, The Beautiful Now Project. You'll see all my information there. We're glad to see you guys.
All right, Derek. Thanks so much for being here, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks, guys. Have a great one.
See ya.
Take care.
All right. Cool. So then we'll go to Jatin now. Of course, Jatin, we know that all of your apps are free and such like that, but I would still, I am still curious to see maybe your process. Because the original question was, how do you go about porting your iOS apps or your desktop apps to iOS? So let me ask you, how do you go about figuring out what is going to be your next app that you're actually going to develop? Because you do have quite a bunch of them now, including one of my favorites, which is Build Your Own Distortion, which is crazy. If you don't know that, guys, you got to check that app out. But go ahead. What is your thoughts on this so far, Jatin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a little bit different in that when I started making plugins for iOS, I only had like a couple of desktop plugins. And so those were the ones that I ported. And then since then, as I've been developing new desktop plugins, I've been developing the iOS version more or less at the same time.
Okay.
So it's been more like less of a sort of a porting experience and more of like a co-development experience. I don't know what the right word for it is, or like concurrent development, I guess. So it's a bit tricky because I'm still not really used to thinking about things from like a touchscreen interface standpoint when I'm developing the apps. Like when I'm using it, I see, like I can feel when it doesn't seem right. But when I'm developing it, it's hard for me to figure out like the right interactions. And so that's probably the biggest challenge for me, is figuring out how to set up the app or the plugin so that you can use it pretty much the same way on desktop and iOS, but have the interactions on iOS still feel natural. That's a challenge for me. But I guess on the technical side of things, I use the Juice framework for most of my apps and plugins, and they have a pretty straightforward process for building a iOS version of your app or your plugin. And so that's what I've been doing for the last little while, and that's
very cool. But no, I love that answer. But also, how do you go about deciding which app you're going to do next?
Oh, that's very
a bit of a different question.
Answer. Yeah. I never really know. Like I wish I had some sort of like cookbook way of
plan, some grand plan.
Yeah. Like, okay, here's how I decide what I'm going to do next. But really it typically ends up being like, I'll have an idea one day and I'll think about it for a little bit. If it seems cool, then I'll try to make it. And maybe, I don't know, half the time it doesn't end up like working the way that I'd hoped it would work. And so I just kind of abandon it and maybe come back to it later. And then sometimes things will work a little bit more quickly and it seems, oh, okay, this could be something cool. And then I'll try to run with it a bit further. But I guess for me, it typically is just like whatever. When I'm making music, what do I feel like I could use? So it's like, if it's like, oh, I want a tape plugin that sounds like my specific tape machine, or, oh, I want some guitar distortion, but I want to be able to interact with things at a little bit lower level than just like the pedal knobs or something like that. Basic ideas like that, where I'll be just working on a song or making music and have an idea for something that I would want, or that, I'm not totally happy with the plugins that I have. I guess the only different one is my kick plugin, because I made that for my friend James because he was trying to make a song, and he had this idea of how things should sound. And so I made like a demo plugin for him and he was using it. And then I found that I was using it a little bit too on some of my songs. And so I figured, oh, okay, I'll make it into a full plugin. So yeah, that's the only like exception, I guess.
Very cool. So it just sounds like whatever you're passionate about at the moment, that's what you're going to make. So very, very cool, because those plugins are extremely useful. It makes sense as an idea structure when you want to start making the new apps, because each one has been super useful for me. The Chow kick to create your own, kicks in there and create your own basses and your own drums, really, really cool. And of course the Chow tape plugin, I throw on anything to do with with lo-fi. So that is really, really great stuff. Really awesome stuff. Well, let's go to Caspar next, because Caspar, all the Baby Audio's apps, they almost look like already that they're kind of designed for iOS, because they're so slick and they have these beautiful graphics, and they look like you can just tap, touch on stuff, as opposed to just use a mouse and click. So maybe you can talk about as well that, in addition to the main question, which is how do you guys go about figuring out what you're going to port to iOS? Maybe you can also talk about some of the most difficult things. But when it comes to your guys' user interface, it's crazy, because they kind of seem like they're already made for iOS. But go ahead. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, actually. I haven't thought about it like that, but thank you for saying it.
Absolutely.
I think one way we think about the visual design of our plugins, but that's starting with the desktop plugins, because that's kind of where we start always, is that we think about it as if they are digitally native. So a lot of effects are kind of an attempt to take something that was physical once, like, I don't know, like an 1176 compressor or whatever, and then replicating it in some kind of graphic with a knob on it or whatever. And we try to force ourselves to ask the question, what if hardware had never existed? What if music was always ever made on a screen? How would you make the controls? Like, do you really need knobs and sliders? Or could you do something differently, because you have a whole different space that you're working with on a screen? You're not like constrained to physical objects such as knobs and sliders and stuff like that. So for our desktop plugins, we always try to think about it like that. And I say try because I don't want to claim we've solved it necessarily. Like, we're trying to push ourselves with every new plugin. Our early ones had more basic knobs and stuff. So this is also something we're learning along the way. But I guess we're just asking ourselves that with the desktop plugins, and that kind of thinking, I guess, just lends itself well to the iOS platform. Because
what a fascinating
one big
philosophy.
screen,
Yeah.
you don't even have the mouse or the keyboard, right? You just have the actual screen. So I guess that's why they translate well. And to answer your second question about porting, just like Jatin, we're in the G.A.S framework. So in a way, it's kind of simple just to kind of port it over. What's hard sometimes is, because we design it with the desktop in mind, the visuals and I guess the shape of the interfaces sometimes, and also sometimes the actual controls are not ideal on a small device like the iPhone, for instance. It gets very small. And so what actually takes a long time is to try and just kind of repurpose it a little bit. But it's not so much that we have to make a new plugin per se. It's more like we have to take an existing plugin and just figure out how does that translate over to the screen. And that's why we started with our freebies, because we thought, at least if we give them away for free, if something's not working, then people can't really blame us for selling them something that didn't work. And then as they were working, we then went on to the first paid product with Crystalline. And that was just because that was the one we had just worked on. The idea is to port everything over. And we are doing it. We're working on it. It's just coming slowly. So,
Awesome.
But it will happen.
You heard it here, folks. We're going to hopefully get as many plugins as they have, hopefully, on iOS, man. I'm really looking forward to them. That is,
if there's anything you want first, just email me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Caspar.io, yeah. We'll do them in the order of demand, basically.
Oh, okay, interesting. Man, I got to get a poll then going on, because, man, I want Super VHS like yesterday. But that's awesome. But what a fascinating and interesting design philosophy, though. Trying to start out with creating something that would have, if hardware never had existed, what would this user interface look like? And that is really interesting and fascinating how it actually does, because you thought like that, translate almost perfectly to iOS. Because it really is, like, for Crystalline, I think is my best example, where you can just look at it and it kind of looks like an iOS app. If you've used a lot of iOS apps, and you don't know that it's for desktop, you'll be like, yeah, okay, that's definitely for iOS. Because you have these beautiful touch screens. Everything is just beautifully, you just know that you have to touch this to modify this, as opposed to, with a bunch of different knobs and switches and things like that. So really, really interesting. And of course, those free plugins worked beautifully, and they were super simple, just that one slider, again, going back to your guys' design philosophy. So really, really interesting stuff. I'm glad that we got that shared because, man, I was wondering why. Like, how come all of Baby Audio's apps already look like their iOS apps? So really, really cool stuff, man. I'm really glad.
Pure coincidence. Pure luck.
All right, cool. All right, guys. Well, then I really, really appreciate everybody for being here. We got through all 3 topics really successfully, and super appreciate, of course, Derek from IK Multimedia being here. He had to dip a little bit early, but we super appreciate his time. Make sure you guys check out all the links, of course, down below. But in the meantime, Jatin, tell us, where can we find out more about you, sir?
Yeah, I'm not really on social media very much, but I have a little website, chowdsp.com.
So that's how you get so much work done. Okay.
Yeah, I guess so. I have a little YouTube channel, but I don't know the link or anything off the top of my head. But yeah, I don't post there very often either. Only when I have like a new plugin, pretty much. Yeah, that's pretty much where I'm at. And I guess I'm on GitHub for anyone who's into programming. I'm always doing stuff on there.
Absolutely. All of Jatin's stuff is open source, I believe, right? So yeah, man.
Yeah, all the plugins we've released so far.
What an amazing resource. In addition to AudioKit, having these open source resources is absolutely really, really, really great thing. It's going to help move our whole ecosystem forward. So I do strongly believe that the stuff that AudioKit's putting out and the stuff that Jatin's putting out, it really is going to move the whole ecosystem forward with these open source projects, because where else are you going to start? This stuff is really, really difficult. And there's, believe it or not, not a whole lot of actual audio hardware developers out there. We're talking about like less than 100 pretty much that like make everything that you've ever seen. It's really a really small world. So to have those resources open source, really appreciate that, Jatin. Next up, and finally, we have Caspar. Caspar, tell us where you can find more about you. And of course, again, we will have the links to everybody on here, but go ahead and tell the folks where we can find out more about you.
Yeah, I mean, obviously on the App Store, Baby Audio. If you search our company name, you should find our free apps. Then babyaudio.com or babyaud.io is our website. If you're into making desktop music as well, there's free trials for everything. There's a few freebies also. We're on social media as well, if you search for Baby Audio. And the last thing I want to say, use this opportunity to say is we are new to this iOS world. And we also have a little bit of respect for the fact that everything we make is made primarily with a desktop user in mind. But people that use mobile devices think quite differently sometimes about how they make music. We can learn from that. So we would actually love to hear from people. Like, I'm sure if someone's listening to this, they're very deep into this community. Otherwise, I'm sure they wouldn't spend their time listening to something that goes deep. And that's also a compliment because I love it. But yeah, if anyone's listening to this and wants to give us some feedback, or I don't know, like give us some insights into the kind of apps people are looking for, we definitely want to learn about it because it's a space we find really interesting. And also, like, just like as a last anecdotal thing, like I find it really fascinating. You said that earlier in this conversation, that you have these tools that are so powerful, like music software nowadays, and you can walk around with them in your pocket. If you think about a studio in the 80s, the 90s, like $1 million studios, you can have all that stuff in your pocket. I think in a way that's way more mind-blowing than desktop music is because of the portable aspect. But I also think like maybe it lends itself then to different kinds of tools. And for us as a company, we're only scraping the surface of what that is. We're actually just kind of taking random shots by just porting our stuff over. I would love to do something iOS specific, but we're just still figuring out what could that be. So if anyone has any ideas, just send me a note.
Absolutely. Guys, look, if Baby Audio is looking for ideas, folks, if you guys got any ideas, definitely put them in the comments below. You got an amazing developer like Baby Audio. This is an amazing opportunity, guys, for you to give your feedback and see what we can do, because they are in a perfect position to be able to create something new for everybody. They got amazing desktop plugins. They're now on iOS, and now they're looking to do something custom for iOS. So definitely leave some feedback in the comments below, because I tell you, people come up to me, they're like, look, we've already had the mobile revolution with laptop, and to me, I have to say that that's not quite the same. For me, the mobile revolution is iOS because of the software, because of how easy it is to use. Laptop is just a clone of the desktop, but in portable form. But with iOS, it's literally this is a magical piece of freaking glass, people, that you can literally have anything on the desktop as well as touch interface. But for me personally, it's been that ease of use, that zero configuration. Download CUBASIS 3, add a track, and you're done. There is no other configuration. And then, of course, we have amazing developers like Baby Audio. You can go and grab a brand new, fantastic top-of-the-line reverb for $30. and you're good to go. So that for me is the mobile revolution. So I definitely appreciate that you agree with that, Caspar, for sure as well. So all right, guys, I think we can leave it there. Thank you again for everybody so much for joining us. We will have more of these podcasts. Definitely make sure you hit the links below to check out more of our other podcasts, and of course check out our website with all of our sample packs, MIDI packs, and all that good stuff as well. So until next time, everybody, keep talking music, and we'll see you later. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Hey everybody, Vortex here, and if you're not aware yet, we now have over 100 fully edited mobile music tutorial videos. And we make music every single Wednesday live on our channel right inside of CUBASIS on our iPad. Plus, we also have a bunch of free sample packs, guides, and more at our website at MobileMusicPro.com/free. And so if you are into that sort of thing, producing music on your iPhone or iPad, then definitely make sure to subscribe and check out the rest of the videos on the channel that we know you'll love.